Fantastic. One always has to make a pause right at the beginning to ensure that I hear the recording now in progress. So I'm going to share my slides. So I'm very much hoping that that is now there. Tahina, could you just nod? Can we see the
Yeah.
slides now? Fantastic. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. It's lovely to see you all. It's lovely to see so many familiar faces and to meet some new people on the call today. This is our termly update from the local authority around special educational needs and disabilities and the breadth of our services and the support for children and families. I'm just going to introduce myself and the other colleagues who are going to be joining on this call, and then also go briefly through the agenda before handing over for our first substantive item. So on the call today, you'll see myself. So that I'm Elizabeth Fitzpatrick, and I'm the Director for Education and Early Help. And although it's not in the title, a lot of the council's services that support children and families with SEND sit in my division. You'll also meet Mark Mapstone. So Mark is our Service Manager for Infrastructure, Information and Transformation. Quite a title. He's going to be talking to us about the Family Information Service directories, including our Send local offer and how we are looking to develop those. We'll also be seeing Catherine Brooke on the call. So Catherine is our lead for our ARPs, our additionally resource provisions, which are in a number of our schools, as many of you will know. And she will be talking to us around about ordinarily available guidance and the new guidance for parents and carers to explain what ordinarily available provision looks like in our schools and the guidance that we have given schools as well. After Catherine has spoken, we're going to go to Claire, who is our short breaks consultant, and she'll talk to us about where we've got to with our short breaks review, which a number of you will know that we have been looking at. And then finally, hopefully, if we get our timings right, Alison Stewart, who is the Deputy Director of Children's Services for Merton and Wandsworth NHS in Southwest London, will join us right at the end of our meeting at 11:50. She had some clashes this morning, so hence I'm being really quite precise about the times for Alison, but it is towards the end, so just to flag that for you. And obviously, Alison isn't local authority or council; she is the ICB from the ICB, the Integrated Care Board for Southwest London. But we just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce her. She's in her new role, and she'll give a little bit of an ICB update. Okay, so I've gone through this agenda. I think the only thing I haven't mentioned, so as I said, local offer developments from Mark. I'll talk about parenting programs. Over to Catherine from Ordinarily Available. We'll have that break for questions after Catherine. I'll come back then after the break to give you a little bit of feedback about our recent SEND conference. Claire will talk about short breaks and then brief updates around the new special school. And then, as I said, hopefully Alison with ICB updates at the end. Okay, so Mark, I am going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good morning, everyone. Elizabeth, I'll just say when to move the slides on because I'm going to summarise. They're quite wordy in some places. So these slides were put together for the SEND local offer focus group that met on the 12th of June. And in that meeting, we agreed that we were going to have a monthly meeting moving forward. So the second Tuesday of each month, I think around 11 or 12 o'clock, there's going to be an ongoing focus group. So if anyone would like to be part of that group, there's an open offer to join us and attend. So I've been working in Merton for just over a year, initially working on the Family Hub programme, and then around about April time took over some line management responsibility for the information manager, Charles Valler, who's responsible for the online digital offer. And I've also brought in a former colleague that I've worked with in Lambeth and Barking and Dagenham, a guy called Dan Oakley, and Dan has been leading a lot of this work with us. Dan developed the SEND local offer in Lambeth, which is quite a good exemplar of how local offers can be sort of made accessible. And we use a piece of software called iDocs to generate all of our information. So we're looking at how we can develop iDocs as a product, but also want to get much more involvement from parents, carers, families, and young people in how we develop that work. So if you go to the next slide, please, Elizabeth. So FIDO has become the kind of working title for this piece of work, and FIDO stands for Family Information Digital Offer, and it encompasses a range of things. So not just limited to SEND, but also looking at the youth offer, the information directories that we have, and trying to bring all those things together so they look and feel the same. And what I often say is, if you're on the Tesco website or the John Lewis website and you're looking at groceries and then you decide you want to do your insurance that day, it all doesn't suddenly change and look completely different. It feels like a fairly seamless experience. So what we're looking at is how to bring as much of the information as possible together as we can, and to use that information to make it more accessible for you, really, to get the information that you need at the right time and of good quality. So we employed a group called marketing company called Keystone to work with us, and we had a number of focus groups that were attended by some by parents, some by staff, and then we used that to sort of shape some key recommendations and objectives that are forming our plan. So on the next slide, please, Elizabeth, there's the beginning of our recommendations. So what we're talking about is having more co-design and testing so that we're working directly with the people that are going to use the website and make it more accessible to you. So there's some new ideas around how we sort of access the information, but also having a guided search tool. So at the moment, if you were to type in young carers, it will bring back everything that has the word young in it and everything that has the word carers in it. And what we're looking at with iDocs as our software developer is to introduce something a little bit more intuitive and something very similar to, if you go onto Google now and you type in a phrase, it will bring up a kind of artificial intelligence summary of what you're looking for. So as part of our development work, we're looking at integrating some artificial intelligence into the iDocs solution as well, but also looking for some quick wins and providing some online training as well. So we're looking at making some videos that we're talking to our youth inclusion team about how some young people could be involved in that as well, but also that sort of help function so that if you are stuck, there is somewhere or something to guide you through it. If we could look at the other recommendations, please. So also looking at some quick links packs as well. So how we get information to you quickly, so you're not sort of wading through all of the treacle in the system, and actually looking for sort of things that are sort of quick, easy to find, and more accessible. And also now starting to look at how we can get more information out through newsletters, social media, and WhatsApp groups. So we've been looking at how we can sort of develop what we've currently got, and then broadening that out to look at things like an Instagram account and other things that people use on a daily basis. Because I think what we acknowledge is the idea of coming and sitting at the big computer and sort of doing things isn't really how most people work now. Most people are using information on their mobile phone and using that sort of scrolling technique. So we've been looking at different ways of sort of presenting the information, and then, sorry, a pop-up keeps coming up, and then reviewing that information. So at the moment, we've got about 2,000 entries on the family information directory, and we're going to do a sort of blanket email out to all of our providers, asking them to update their information over the summer, so we can then start to have much more accurate and up-to-date information, and also then starting to look at how we can sort of have a booking system or have information so you know that spaces are available and where those services are being provided. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Elizabeth. So then this is the point really about wanting to involve parents as well, but also looking at parents who might have dyslexia or English might not be their first language, but also people that might have low confidence in using the internet and sort of using that to sort of find those hard to reach groups and engaging with those people, but also taking it away from being quite kind of heavy word text and actually looking at putting more visual things in there, more infographics, and the use of plain English. And there's a really handy bit of software called Hemingway Editor, and when you sort of take information from your sort of web page and put it into Hemingway Editor, it then assesses the reading age, and the average reading age in the UK is about 8 or 9, and we were looking at some of the pages that we've got online, and you'd have to be about 15 or 16 to understand some of that language. So what we're looking at is paring the language down, making things much more accessible, but also looking at how we can translate information into other languages. So when we did this piece of work at Barking and Dagenham, we had a piece of software that enabled us to translate the pages into 200 different languages, but also within that, it would sort of speak back to you in some languages as well. So we're exploring how we can sort of make things more accessible, make the language easier, and then because the language is easier, it's easier to translate. And then if English isn't your first language, or you want to read stuff in the language that you are sort of confident in, or the language that you speak, then we're making those things accessible. And also then that final point around monitoring and learning, really. So that sort of you said, we did approach to make sure that what we're doing is in response to the needs that you have, and how we're using ongoing feedback to constantly improve what we're doing. So our headline at the moment is we've got about 2,000 pages to review. And then as we're improving the sort of the accessibility of that information, we're then going to start putting more feedback loops into the system. And we've also been developing some brand awareness surveys around family hubs to start collecting people's views about their experience when they visit a family hub, but then also looking at how we can extend that out beyond the brand awareness around family hubs to then include the changes that we're proposing to make around the family information digital offer. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So iDocs, as I've said, is our sort of key piece of software. And what we're looking at in Q4, so in the run up to Christmas, is introducing that artificial intelligence, which would mean you can get like a really powerful search. So if you're typing in young carers, it will only bring things back that are relevant to young carers. And also the multi-factor authentication, get my words right, effectively is about how you can then log on to the system and sort of have your own saved searches and things like that. So it is about developing the product to make it more intuitive, but also to make it more like the sort of experience you get if you are on a website like Google or Amazon or something like that. So it will never be sort of have all that functionality, but we are looking at how we can improve access to information. So there's a bit of a roadmap in the current financial year and then some work into next year as well. If we could look at the next slide, please. So I think the longer term stuff, as I said, is about the development of the artificial intelligence, sort of looking at how we sort of reimagine the directory so that making information much more accessible, but also that geographic information system, or GIS, is about how we can map things across the area. But also we've been talking to iDocs about if we've got someone in Croydon, for example, and Croydon are using the same system, would it be sort of intuitive enough that it can give you a wider reach rather than just the geographical area in terms of Merton as a borough? So we're looking at how we can sort of develop that work outside of the Merton offer, but also obviously focus very much on what's available in Merton. And that last bit is a little bit technical, open referral standards. This is something that the Department for Education are encouraging that local authorities adapt and adopt. So effectively all the information can be linked together. So it's really, if you think about open referral standards, as we're all using the same language in the same format, and then how that information can all be integrated. So ultimately sort of working towards a kind of a nationwide solution that is some years away, but it is very clearly on the DFE roadmap. Next slide, please. So in terms of where we are now, we've been looking at how our current offer is developed. So the corporate website there is the Send local offer, and we've scaled this so it looks like it would on a mobile phone. And that's the sort of concept really about moving away from it feeling like it's big computer and more about the device, handheld device in your pocket. And then there's some recent examples there around Young Merton and the Family Hub directory. And I think what we're trying to do is make things a little bit softer, a little bit easier to find your way through and feeling a little less corporate. So I think what we're signaling here is that we want to move away from that kind of corporate feel and something that is more user-friendly, sort of driven and developed by young people and their parents, and having a kind of softer look. And I think on the next slide, there's some examples from other local authorities. So as I said, so we've got the one on the left-hand side, which is Reading, which is quite text heavy. The middle one is Islington, which is more kind of bit similar to ours at the moment, driven by icons. And then the third one is Liverpool. And we had a really good meeting with Liverpool and the person that manages their local offer there. And if you look at the one that says City Health Services, there's kind of strange animal shape around. This is the lambana, which is the front of a lamb and the back of a banana. And if you've ever been to Liverpool, there's like a 4-meter statue of that lambana. So it's something that is iconic to Liverpool. And they decided that rather than having photographs they would have sort of graphics that represented different aspects. And part of that was about responding to how do you sort of illustrate an invisible disability? So moving away from it being about sort of how human representation and more about some character-driven work. And when we were talking about a name for our new system and the family information digital offer came up, I just wrote down the word Fido, and then we started thinking, well, Fido could be a character, and that Fido effectively could be the person, the thing that guides you through the system. So we've done one workshop at Cricket Green with some young people who started doing some illustrations of what Fido might look like, and we're going to do some more of those with some other groups of young people as well. But the idea then is that we will give that to an illustrator and then come up with a sort of visual idea of what Fido looks like. And at the moment, we were just doing a working piece with Fido being a dog. I think there's some examples coming up. If we could look at the next slide, please, Elizabeth. This one we're just going to skim over. This is our detailed plan. So what we're doing over each of the next 4 quarters. If people want to get into more detail, that's what the focus group is about in terms of how we sort of pick up on each of these elements and get into the detail with them. So that's just there to illustrate there is a broader plan. But if we could move on to the next slide, please. So this is about some quick wins. So looking at how we can develop that new image and that new voice, making the language easier to understand a reading age of about 8. Making things more visual, so looking at the young Merton example and how we can develop that, and that's really where we want input from children, young people and their parents and carers. Also looking at how we can develop our video content. When we did this piece of work in Lambeth and Barking Dagenham, we did some animations and did some interviews with staff and parents, so there were people actually talking about the website and how it's helpful to them. So we want to do some work around creating some video content. And then there's the potential of moving on to a different platform. So at the moment, our contract with iDocs expires in the current financial year, so there will be some form of procurement exercise. But what we really want to do is sort of look at how we can develop a kind of app for this piece of work, so it's something that you can easily access and download, and also look at how we use that artificial intelligence. There is a slight embargo on the development of AI in the council at the moment, simply because they want to test things in a live environment. So I think that's a good signal that we're not just leaping into using new technology, we're actually thoroughly testing it and make sure it's fit for purpose and meets our need before going live with any of that. And we're anticipating that being around sort of Christmas or early into next year. I think there's one more slide or 2 more slides. So our next steps, we currently have a vacant post for an information officer. There is a member of staff on secondment who is covering some of those duties. We're going to redesign that job and get it reevaluated, and then we'll advertise that role. And really what we want is someone that will be doing all the things that I've just discussed as a permanent member of staff, and that would be their job. And a lot of that was based on the conversations that we had with Liverpool. Do some further investigation around our branding and make sure that we get sort of something that is recognizable, easy to understand, but also looking at how we put more information around sort of video and working with young people and families. So just to stress it again, that SEND local offer group that meets on the 2nd Tuesday of the month, we would love it if more people could find the time to join that, but also we can talk about how we can do things outside of that time as well. And there were some comments around sort of, I might just be looking for a sporting thing rather than a supportive thing. So just looking at how we can separate the information out. So those sort of fun activities against those more kind of supportive activities. Looking at a sort of news ticker. So when you go onto the website or the app, that there's something there that tells you new information. And then the other bit was around our wider comms and how we sort of get information out into the public domain, but also make sure that the information that we have is up to date, accurate, and reliable. And I think the last slide is just some illustrations of Fido. So this was this idea about having some sort of character to help us sort of navigate our way through the system. At the SEND focus group, we had the idea of the dog could be an assistance dog or a guide dog, and we thought that was quite a fun way of sort of interacting with the system. Then the idea of a cat came up in terms of Sendo. We were avoiding the wombles, but there was just an illustrative example at the top. So the idea that we try to make something a little bit more child-friendly as well, but also something that you can interact with and something a little bit more friendly. I think that's the end of the slides.
It is indeed. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
That's the end of your slides. and I can't see the questions in the chat at the moment, Mark, but I know you've got to leave us and won't be around for the questions in the middle. So would you mind just having a look at the chat, see if there's anything that's relevant? If you could just have a quick look at that before you go, that would be really brilliant. Yeah.
I don't think there are any questions there now, but if
Okay.
anyone wants to quickly throw them in, otherwise if Mark's not around, Elizabeth will try her best to answer, or she'll pass it over to him to be answered at a later date.
I think the main point is about the focus on policy rather than digital content. That's probably the bit that's, I think that's covered later in the agenda, isn't it?
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's over to me now, and I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the parenting programs that we have in Merton. This was a request that we had from the Kids First Steering Group, just to have a bit of an overview. And normally I would love to be handing over at this point to somebody called Adam Warner or somebody called Hannah Wynard. Adam and Hannah lead on our parenting programs in Merton. And they can talk about it so passionately. I'm afraid you have me. I will try to inject the same level of passion and interest into these programs because it is we feel it is a strong evidence-based approach to supporting parents. And these are programs, so these are courses for the most part, either online or in person. But then, of course, there are other places where parents can receive support in other places on a more sort of one-to-one basis, for example, through our family wellbeing service. So I'm first of all going to talk about a suite of programs called Triple P. In a moment, in fact, I think there it is, the Triple P programs, we've got 5 of them. And you can see that the Triple P stands for Positive Parenting Program. And for anyone taking on that parenting role, whether it's a step parent, a foster parent, or a grandparent, and has a focus on that knowledge and skills to help with bringing up children. And you can see in terms of those headlines that we've got a range of age groups and different needs covered off. And I'm going to go through those in a little bit more detail now. So each of the slides looks like this. It's got the age range for who the children, so for the parents of children of these particular ages. It talks about how long it lasts, a little bit more of the detail, the topics covered, and what parents would get as a result of attending. And then the final point at the bottom of each of these slides, you can see the delivery methods. And a lot of the programs are indeed can be either group face-to-face or online. So just a little bit about some of these. So the first Triple P is for under 11s, and this one is for children who have challenging behaviours or behaviours that challenge. Let's just think a bit more carefully about our language. Apologies for that. Such as frequent shouting, aggression, or hitting. Whether it's directed at family members, furniture, or siblings. And as you can see, as I said, this is a combination of group and online. Our next Triple P program is called Fearless. Oh, I thought I'd taken these out. There we go. Put them in quickly so that there isn't a transition every time. Fearless. This is for parents of children for a broader age range between 6 years and 14 years. And this is where anxiety is affecting those children in their daily life. And particularly whether anxiety is preventing them or their family from engaging in certain activities. As you can see, again, delivery method, group, and online. The next Triple P program, to give you a little bit of information about, is again in the primary age range. So for parents of children aged between 5 and 11. And this is specifically designed for parents of children with developmental or physical disabilities and disruptive behaviour. Again, behaviour that disrupts, behaviour that challenges. Apologies. Triple P Stepping Stones, as it's called, provides those strategies to support the management of behaviour. and really important to understand that no formal diagnosis is needed to be able to join the Stepping Stones program. Triple P Teen, as it says on the tin, has a focus on those adolescent years between ages of 10 and 16. And again, particularly thinking about where parents are struggling to manage children's behavior. You know, if there's a lot of shouting, little agreement, and if you're feeling worried about this program can offer support. Oh, right, again. So I had thought I had amended this slide and will when I've sent it out, but I can see this. You probably won't be able to see this. I will amend it so it is presentable. Triple P Baby. So this is for parents of who are transitioning into parenthood, so becoming parents themselves, maybe still pregnant, and with a baby up to 12 months of age. So it's really focuses on baby development, what influences that baby's development, and what you can do to create a positive learning opportunity every day, supporting responses to babies, and it's also calling survival skills, so discovering common emotional traps that new parents can experience, and learning coping strategies to manage those really uncomfortable situations of stress, anxiety, and sadness. This one is online only. The final of our Triple P programs is Triple P Resilience. This is our newest in the Triple P suite. And we've received particular funding to be able to trial this. Because it is so brand new. It's not just brand new to us, it is brand new to the Triple P suite altogether. And so it is being rolled out. We've just finished training people on this. And in fact, I think we just had our first cohort of parents and children. So it is interestingly that this one is particularly CBT informed, and there is support both here for both parents and children within the program, or sessions for both parents and children. And as you can see, it focuses on for those children who experience bullying and peer challenges. So you can see these are the 4 parent sessions and the sorts of things that are covered there. And then the children's sessions look like this. And so some support there if they are themselves experiencing bullying. As I said, we're really, really happy to have got some additional funding to be able to trial this because we knew that this was a need locally. And as I said, the first cohort, I think, have just gone through this and the feedback has been wonderful. In fact, I think the certificates for completion were presented just earlier this week. So online, there are some particular Triple P online courses, which are, you know, obviously you do these at your own pace. And so they may be a more useful way to access than perhaps the face-to-face versions. So we've got the sort of generic Triple P online, which is around confidently handling everyday parenting challenges for parents of children up to 12. Then we've got the teen Triple P, which we've already referred to, the Fearless, again, which we've already referred to, supporting children and helping them to manage anxiety, and then the online for babies. So as I said, those may be more accessible. And just a little bit of information about those. So you can choose which ones you would like to access. The videos are what we're calling fun, providing fun interactive learning, and it's accessible on a phone, a computer, or a tablet. You can do it at your own pace. And as you know, there is it is certificated at the end, as our face-to-face programs are as well. The next we've got some additional programs that I'd like to share with you now. The first is called the Freedom Program. And this is an 11-week rolling program, so there is no particular stop or start time. It is women can join this program when they want. It's program designed primarily to support women who have experienced or currently experiencing domestic abuse. And it is this space. So as you can see, if it's online, not online, sorry, it's rolling, but it's a safe, provides that safe space as women join. Women can support each other in a non-judgmental environment, and understand, enables them to understand behaviors, build resilience, and empower themselves to regain control. I think we covered that off. I put in here for all of the programs that I'm going to refer to today, you can either self-refer, or if you are involved with some of our professionals or officers. So for example, I mentioned before the Family Wellbeing Service, so professionals within a variety of different services could also support with a referral. But if you want to self-refer yourself to any of these programs, Hannah, who I referred to at the beginning of this part of the presentation, who is our manager in the parenting service, please do just contact her. Her email address is there, and as I said, it will go out in the slides, and you can either, yes, by email or by phone. But I'm also just going to come to a couple of other programs as well. Or other offers. So this is a flyer on the left-hand side, which talks about that digital parenting offer in summary. And I'm going to come on to, as I said, some of these in a bit more detail. I wanted to draw your attention to the right-hand side, which is the Merton Parenting Cafe, which is a drop-in space which happens on at 9:30 to 11:30 on the first Tuesday of every month at the Acacia Children's Centre in Mitcham. As I said, it's drop-in. There are refreshments. There will be colleagues on hand to talk through the parenting options available, and maybe to explore in a little bit more detail some of the things that we're presenting today if you had more questions. And obviously the opportunity to meet other parents and carers and children are indeed welcome in that space, as of course you would expect in a children's centre. So as I said, there are some more programs just to flag with you. So we commission 1+1, who are a charity and who've been designing and delivering relationship support programs to practitioners. So this is relationship support for parents. So again, it supports the parenting experience, but it's in particular situations where the relationship, the adult's relationship in particular, is proving challenging to that parenting. Proving challenging to parenting. So again, evidence-based, underpinned by a lot of research to ensure that they promote as positive outcomes as possible for parents, children, and young people. So the first one of these is around Me, You, and Baby 2. So again, similarly to the Triple P baby program, it's for the similar sorts of cohort, but it's for new and expectant parents to think about the changes that parenthood can have on a relationship, and really raising the awareness of the impact of stress and conflict on their baby. Yes, you can see there a flyer on the right-hand side for this program. The next program is entitled Arguing Better, helps to raise awareness of parental conflict and its impact on children. So maybe for parents of older children, gives parents the skills to cope with that stress and manage that conflict more constructively, to the benefit, obviously, of children within the family as well. Another program, Getting It Right for Children. still within that 1+1 suite of programs, and this focuses particularly on those communication skills, but particularly for when parents are separating, and to ensure that children are put first, even in the middle of that really sad and often difficult situation. There is then a 1+1 program which is about debt and relationships, and it looks in response particularly to the cost of living crisis that has arisen over the past few years, and helping parents to understand the impact that debt can have on relationships, and again how they can work through that together. I think the last one in terms of this suite of programs is where parents are in the middle of separating. This is an app as opposed to a program. So it's free, self-guided mobile app for parents who are separating, designed to facilitate that smoother separation journey and promote that positive co-parenting, again, keeping children at the heart of what's happening. Mixture of advice, video resources, practical parenting ideas, as well as looking at budgeting plans and how to manage that co-parenting together. Okay, that's me in terms of parenting programs, things available to adults. And I think the last part of what we're doing before we come to questions in the middle of our session today is we're coming to Catherine, who's going to talk to us about ordinarily available guidance.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Hi, everybody. I'm Catherine Brooke. As Elizabeth mentioned at the beginning, my sort of substantive role is sort of lead for the additionally resource provisions. Part of that has been doing quite a lot of work around the ordinarily available guidance, which obviously is sort of more mainstream focused rather than the more specialist ARP places. I'm talking today sort of almost on behalf of the variety of local authority officers, but parents and carers and SENCOs who've been involved in all these ordinarily available groups. So I'm just going to talk you through what ordinarily available guidance is, what it looks like in Merton, and then introduce the parent carers guidance that we have recently co-produced, that will be formally out hopefully by the end of, well, I say the end of this week, it's Friday already, but I'm hoping it'll be on the local offer imminently. Thank you. So the ordinarily available guidance comes from the SEND Code of Practice. It comes it's basically based on the SEND Code of Practice, which provides the statutory guidance, as I'm sure you're aware, for all organisations that work with and support children and young people who have SEND. This covers early years settings as well as schools. It also refers to Part 3 of the Children and Families Act, which details the duties and policies and procedures that need to be followed to support children with SEN. And the main points are that, the local authorities need to consider the views of children, young people and their parents, and the importance of them being involved in decision making. This is also linked to the Equality Act 2010, which sets out the legal obligations that school, early years providers, post-16 institutions, local authorities and others have towards children and young people, and sets out the 9 protected characteristics. So this ordinarily available guidance is set within these legal frameworks. So what, and sorry, if we just go, it's mentioned within the SEND Code of Practice. Thank you. If you could go on to the next slide here. So then what is ordinarily available guidance? In a number of other local authorities, it's referred to as ordinarily available provision. So OAP and OAG are used interchangeably. In Merton, we use OAG, but if you're in other local authorities or have heard about it, you may hear OAP, ordinarily available provision. We actually felt that OAP wasn't a very useful, set of initials, so we've gone with OAG. it provides, so ordinarily available guidance refers to the settings-based practices, interventions and services that all Merton schools, early years and post-16 settings are expected to provide within their own resources. So this is for prior to any EHCP, really potentially even prior to any SEND being identified. It's anything that supports a more inclusive provision to support everybody within schools and settings. The SEND Code of Practice highlights the importance of high quality teaching as an element of ordinarily available provision. Thank you. Next slide. The ordinarily available guidance within Merton is aimed at the professionals working within education settings. And again, that's all settings, including private nurseries. But it is also intended to support parents and carers to have a better understanding of the support that's available to your children. So it's written from a profession as a professional to professional document, but is open, of course, for everyone to see and understand more. If you could move on to the next document. Thank you. So how do settings use ordinarily available guidance? So here there's a number of sort of options. So it's intended to support all settings to develop their inclusive provision to benefit all children, including those with SEND, because as we well know, often good quality practice, high quality teaching isn't just a benefit for anyone with SEND, it's a benefit for all children. So it's aimed to be used to meet the needs of individual children and groups. Excuse me. It can be used when planning how to adapt lessons or activities to meet the needs of the children in the class or individual children. It can be used to help deliver a graduated response to children who have been identified as needing more targeted support. Obviously, that ties in with the assess, plan, do, review model. The graduated response as set out within the Code of Practice is around providing initial support and show how that has helped or not helped and build on that level of support in a graduated way. And that ties in with the assess, plan, do, review model and potentially the need for SEND support plans for children. And obviously that process, if necessary, can escalate to the need for an EHCP, and ordinarily available guidance runs all the way through this, because you may also find that ordinarily available guidance is then sort of mandated, as it were, within an EHCP, but is available earlier on. It can be used as a bank of ideas, resources and strategies, but one of its other sort of focuses is to outline a set of expectations to encourage consistency between schools and settings across Merton. We know that not ordinarily available guidance will not look the same in every school. Every school has a different context. Every school has different types of needs more prevalent in their school. So it's not going to look identical in one school to another, but we are encouraging consistency so that you shouldn't, excuse me, have a situation where a need can't be met in one school that can be met in another within a mainstream setting. Thank you. Move on. There are three types of ordinarily available guidance. In Merton, we've separated it out into early years and primary and secondary. This is all available on the website and when the slides come out, and there's a link at the bottom of this so you can see these. I'm not going to look in a lot of detail at all of these because they are quite weighty documents, they're quite long, but I thought I'd cover a little bit about what's in each of these areas. Thank you. If you could move to the next slide. Each of the four areas from the Code of Practice are set out within each of these three versions of ordinarily available. So communication and interaction, cognition and learning, social, emotional, mental health, and sensory and physical. As I'm sure you know, support is not reliant on any diagnosis, and children may need support in any or all of these areas. So this is not, these don't correspond to diagnoses, this corresponds to the need that the child might or young person might have. Thank you. In each of these 4 sections, and this is for the primary and secondary, I will talk about the early years, which is set out a little bit differently in just a moment. So for the primary and secondary document for each section, we have so for communication and interaction, that's further divided into 4 areas. Identification and assessment of needs, so that's to support staff members in looking to see what needs a child may present with. If someone has communication and interaction difficulties, this may be what you see in the classroom. Remembering, of course, that this is prior to any more significant, this may well be prior to any other form of external support. So the child may not have seen a speech and language therapist. There may never be a need for a child to see a speech and language therapist, but they may present with some needs within the classroom or early years setting. So it's the first section is around identification and assessment of needs. The second is around environmental supports and adaptations. So what schools and settings can do with the environment to support everybody. The next is around specific approaches and strategies that may be useful for the teacher or school to implement. And then the fourth is a link to other areas where you could find further resources. So there are lots of links to external web pages or other areas, potentially some actual interventions that may work. The early years, which is slightly different, is divided into 2. So it's got the strategies and approaches much more sort of linked, in part because that's more of the way that early years settings work. So the strategies and approaches to the identified barrier and need, and then it's got the useful resources as its second section. Thank you. We can move on. So I've sort of covered these 4 sections anyway, but there's just a little bit more information here around what is in each section. So I think, yes, if we could move on. This is a brief look at what the early years documents looks like. It's too small to see, but you can see sort of the different colours correspond to the different areas of needs. Those colours run through the primary and secondary as well. But this looks at the barrier that you may see and what early years settings could put in place, along with the links in the boxes of other support and guidance that we can signpost schools to. So these, as I mentioned earlier, these, it's not a sort of tick list of what each school should have in place. It's a guidance to support schools in identifying what their cohort needs. And we do know, of course, that, as I said earlier, each school has a different context and has greater or lesser numbers of children with each type of needs. And so what we find as we work and support our schools in implementing this is that a number of schools are then producing their own ordinarily available sort of documents that shows what they have in place for their school, for their children, for their cohorts, the variety of support that the local authority provides when we go in and out with our school inclusion officers, our school inspectors. They look at what's going on within the ordinarily available guidance within the school as well, and how this works. This has now been in place for coming up for 2 years. It was launched 2 years ago. We did a lot of training for the staff at the time, school staff at the time. So we are now at a point of reviewing it, really. There's a working party that looks at reviewing this. What has become clear is that our secondary guidance probably needs a bit of a tweak. So that will be happening over the next academic year, involving our secondary SENCOs. There is still further work to do on embedding this within all our settings, and we are providing further training next academic year for our settings for some of these areas that have been requested. But generally, we have seen a greater understanding of some of the I think what it's given is, I suppose, a greater language, a collective language, and as the aim was a document that can provide us all with a sort of common ground to work from. there is, as I said, still further to go with this. Just seen some questions in the chat that probably this early years document here does look at the under fives. Obviously, that's sort of where it's set up for. So there are things in there that will cover this. But as I say, this is aimed at pupils who are prior to potentially even SEND support or EHCP, and potentially may never need that. So this is not aimed at pupils with significant disabilities or needs, because those pupils will need the additional support of EHCP. Obviously, all children start off as non-verbal, so there are aspects in here to support that. And you will find that some of these some of the advice in here will be within an EHCP if that is necessary for the child, but this is aimed at supporting all children at the earliest stages. So as this has now been going for sort of 2 years, what has become clear over this last year is the need to support all of you as parents and carers in understanding what's going on with this in schools, what this is, what this looks like, how this impacts on your child, whether or not you know it's going on, all those sorts of things. So there was a working group set up to develop a parent and carers guide. I think there's something on the next slide about that, Elizabeth. Yes, excellent. So we had a group here that had Kids First representatives, and I'm sure I saw Liz here earlier, and SENCOs from schools, as well as local authority officers, covering the age range. And so we designed this together. It was co-produced to look at answering the questions that parents have and that schools have received from parents around ordinarily available provision. So it's designed to be used by SENCOs or key workers in all educational settings. Again, that's private nurseries as well as school-based nurseries and primary and secondary schools, but to inform. So it will also be on the local offer once it's finalised and sent out, which, as I said, is due to happen any minute. Obviously, the links will be sent to Kids First to be shared, and to other local authority officers who may need it and for whom it may be useful. It can be printed in booklet form, but it will be available online so that we can use the various translation devices around the place to ensure that this can be accessed by as many parents as possible. If you could flick through to the next slide. This is sort of the first couple of pages of OAG. It will have a subheading on the final draft here. We've done it as I said, a question and answer documentation, which asks questions like, I don't know if you can actually see it, you know, what does ordinarily available guidance mean? Who is the support for? But as well, it talks about how do I know whether this is happening in my school? Who do I talk to? How will I know? And we answer those questions, and that's basically, you need to speak to the child's class teacher. Ordinarily available guidance is happening in every school in Merton. It may well form part of just the normal teaching processes that go on. You may almost not sort of be aware of it because, you know, your child may just have a little bit of extra help in a sort of small reading group or something like that. That is classed as ordinarily available guidance too. Obviously, if there is a need for moving on to the sort of next stage, SEND support, that is where the more formal conversations will happen with you as parents and carers. But the initial way is to speak to your child's class teacher. And we do discuss monitoring of a child's progress there, what you should expect as a parent, and how you will be informed. And we talk about being really clear that, as I've said, you know, on this ordinarily available is aimed at that sort of early stage of help, potentially for children to catch up, because actually we do find that given early intervention, we know how important that is. For some children, that will be enough for them to catch up with their peers. It won't necessarily be for others. We also, at sort of the end of the questions here, have, you know, if I have concerns around this, who should I speak to? And we provide some links to additional resources, which has in here a QR code that takes you directly to the ordinarily available guidance. We've also provided a glossary because we know that the sort of language within SEND, using SEND as an example, can be complex and confusing. So we've added a glossary for some of the terms there. So as I said, I'm expecting this to be formally published literally any day now. So you will be able to access that and receive that, and we will be working with the group that has been developing this in order to ensure that it's making an impact in schools as we go along. So I think that's probably the end of my presentation.
So I'm just going to give you a brief update around our local area SEND conference, which took place last week on last week on Tuesday. Time flies. It was I think the vast majority of people there really felt this was such a worthwhile event. We had over 250 people in the room. And it took place, as I said, last week, and it was at the Beit el-Futuh Mosque in Morden, who were incredibly generous because they offered us that space free of charge and also fed us free of charge. And just wanted to say, in terms of over 250 people in the room, 50 parents signed up, parents and carers, and it was lovely to see so many parents and carers there, again supporting our partnership endeavours moving forward. It had the focus, a topic of autism and neurodiversity, and so our timetable for the day looked like this. We were very grateful to have some local councillors, Councillor Kawesa, who's our council member for Children's Services, and also our council member for Education, Councillor Sally Kenny, was there, starting things off. And then we had our keynote speech from Dean Beadle. For those of you who were able to join us, I think Dean was one of the particular highlights of the day. Dean is an autistic speaker, and he was absolutely inspirational. We then had a really great video which had been produced by our participation and engagement teams, and that heard directly from children who were in Rains Park, who are in Cranmer, who were in Cricket Green, so a range of children and young people with SEND, and them talking about what they would like from us. Then again, very lucky to hear from Shishing Wei Pritchard, who is a parent care advocate. I think that's the right way to put it. And then directly from parents and carers, Jordan and Rebecca themselves, and they spoke incredibly powerfully to us about being neurodiverse parents of neurodiverse children and what that brings in terms of joy as well as the challenges. We then had some workshops. Dean came back to us again and spoke to us about anxiety and autism, how we can best support that. And Sandy Klopper, who is one of our own speech and language therapists, but talked to us about neurodiversity affirming language and practice and why it matters. That was again, a very powerful, very different kind of session, but really helping us to understand, how can we get that language right so that it values, so that we use language that cares, moving away as much as possible from that professional speak. And then the final workshop was from Karen McMurtry, who is an autistic sportswoman. She was previously in the GB rowing squad, and she talked to us about movement as a gateway to learning for regulation and authenticity, again supporting children and young people with autism and who are neurodiverse. So as I said, it was a really great day. Just some headlines we had 250 plus people there, but so far we've only gathered the feedback from just short of 60, 70 of them. There are we will send reminders out again if other people are able to provide us with some feedback. As you can see, really very overwhelmingly positive. We asked colleagues who attended to make pledges to our children and young people with SEND and their families at the end of the conference. And I just wanted to share a couple of those, which are accompanied by some of the pictures of the event. So I won't read out all of these. They are fairly self-evident, but I did want to pick out from this slide. There was a big focus on how environments, and that's not just physical environments, but the broader sort of environmental space that we create for children and young people, how important it is to get that right. To reduce anxiety and to ensure that they're as inclusive as possible. As I said, we had a really powerful session from Sandy Klopper, who talked to us about the language, that neurodiverse affirming language. And as you know, so with the professionals in the room from across education, health and care. So don't know which profession that one came from, but good to understand that we've got people thinking about the language they use. That clear advocacy there as a broad ambition at the bottom. And I suppose I'd like on this one to emphasize the word partnership. We try to work together across education, health and care in Merton, because those are all those things matter, obviously, and it's there within the wording of EHCP, but also for our children who don't have EHCPs but do have a special educational need or disability, and thinking about how we do work together. And I'm really pleased in terms of that second one on that screen, in terms of putting difficulty in inverted commas, because we really challenged professionals in the room to think about, is this a difficulty, or is this actually, again, us thinking in a very potentially neurotypical way about the different strengths and needs of a neurodiverse young person. Okay, so that was a bit of update on our SEND conference. We're now looking forward to next year. We had to work very hard to pull this conference together quite quickly for a number of reasons this year. So I'm already starting to think about next year. And if you have some thoughts about some sorts of things that you would like us to see covered in our in what the theme might be, do let me know. We focused on autism and neurodiversity this year because we know that the numbers of children and young people who are needing EHCPs have that as one of their needs. And we know that even if there isn't a diagnosis, the range of people who are neurodiverse in our schools is also increasing in the broadest sense. So that was the reason why we chose that. But do let me know if you've got any thoughts about what you'd like in the conference focus for next year. Okay, so we're going to move on to the short breaks update. I'm going to introduce this item, and then I'll hand over to Claire Devane, who is our short breaks consultant. And I think I'm just going to start from first principles because not everybody may be aware of what a short break actually is. So a short break is something that local authorities have to be able to provide in different ways for different people, children and their families. And it is, as it says, that opportunity for children and young people to experience some really rich and rich in activities, which then maybe provides also some respite for parents and carers as well. We've been undertaking a short break review in Merton because we know that we've got to do better, and we've got to get this right for you as parents and carers. When I look at it, we're about 2/3 of the way through the review now. Where we're starting from is really quite a confused system, or it can seem that way. So I'm just going to highlight, I'm going to use, Claire and I myself are going to use 3 terms throughout our presentation today. So we're going to be talking about specialist short breaks, and that's the kind of short break or provision for children who have the highest level of need. Then we're going to talk about targeted, which is, if you like, the next level down. So those are specific programs and support at that level. And then the universal. And I'm just going to set the scene before we go in, because the Short Breaks Review has particularly focused at the targeted and specialist level. But we have got, and we have been trying to develop the opportunities for out of school provision and activities for children and young people who have SEND in that more universal space. So we are developing, I know it's not there for everybody yet, but our holidays activity and food program, expanding that offer for children and young people with SEND, whether that is specialist offer, not specialist, I've got to be careful with my language, but offers which are particularly for children with SEND, but at the same time developing the capacity of our universal offer providers to ensure they support children with SEND as well. And I just wanted to say on that matter, we've got some training for our holiday activity and food providers about meeting the needs of children and young people with SEND. I think it's next week now. We've, in terms of that universal space as well, we've got the Borough of Sport initiative. So you may have heard that Merton has a particular focus on developing itself as the Borough of Sport. And there are some activities that are coming out of that work stream, which can support children with SEND as well. Also to support children with SEND outside the school day, to enable them to access other clubs, for example. The government have given all local authorities across the country a bit of money to develop what's called the wraparound care offer. So that's the breakfast club and the after school club provision. And so we're working with schools because they often provide them directly, or if they don't provide them directly, again, they're working with their other providers to do this. But to try to make sure that those are as broad as possible for and as welcoming for children with SEND. And the final thing I wanted to talk about is in this sort of more universal space, and just linking up with what we were talking about, being very mindful of developing environments, including physical environments. We have got some capital money, so that's money which can be used for buildings. It's got to be focused on children with SEND, and that's across the for all children with SEND. So, you know, in the past, particularly, we have used it, for example, to expand PASAID, which is happening at the moment. But this particular bit of capital, we have gone to our mainstream schools to ask them to put in expressions of interest about projects to develop their environments to make them more welcoming for children with SEND. So those expressions of interest have just been submitted, and we are currently evaluating those expressions of interest to understand how, which ones we're going to be able to fund. And obviously that will benefit children during the school day, but also after school, because actually if we are thinking about those spaces which are more welcoming, they're not just for the school day. Okay. So I'm going to come on to the review and updates about that. So we're about 2/3 of the way through the review. It's been brilliant to have Claire with us, and she's been looking in particular at that targeted and specialist provision. So over to you, Claire.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So as Elizabeth has just said, we consulted on a number of proposals to improve the current short breaks offer. We do have final decisions on most of them, but there are still a few that we need to do a little bit of sort of more work on and thinking around. But this is the start of our communicating about the changes that we know about. So my first slide really just sets out changes how families are assessed and can access the offer. And these changes are mainly to address the concerns that came through in the
Claire,
consultation
Claire,
feedback around.
Claire,
Yeah.
sorry, your sound is breaking up, so I'm going to make a
Okay.
suggestion that you may wish to turn off your camera.
Okay. First thing we're going to do, so it's removing the assessment process at a targeted short breaks level, and we're going to replace that with an eligibility check. We still need to finalise the eligibility, but we can say that it will be similar to the eligibility we have for the M card, and I've sort of set that out what that is. We have just under 400 families with an M card, so we are hoping that we will be able to say to those families that they don't need to provide any further information to us, as we already know that they are eligible. And then once the sort of eligibility checks have been done at that targeted level, parents will be given access to an online booking system where they can book places directly with our commission providers. So that's our sort of targeted level. And then access to specialist short breaks will be through the Children with Disabilities team. And this is for children that need one-to-one support. So there will be a child and family assessment, and that will determine the amount and type of support needed by families. We are going to introduce charges for group-based activities, and we're going to be using the income collected from that to increase the offer. So we have set some rates. So we have done benchmarking with other local authorities, and it's a real range, I think, out there. But our decision that was signed off is that we are going to have a rate of £6.50 for after school or half day sessions. So that'll roughly be 3 hours for those sessions, and then the charge will be £10.50 for a full day. So the payments will go directly to providers. So that's part of the online booking system. Once they've booked the places, they will make the payment. I mean, just I suppose to stress that there won't be any requirement for to pay for families in receipt of income-related benefits. I think that's all I have to say on that slide.
I think it's moved forward, Claire.
Okay, yeah, lovely. So then in terms of increasing the offer, we will be able to support more children access a specialist group offer. So that will be an after school, weekend and school holiday offer. This is for the children needing one-to-one support. We'll also be increasing the range and volume in the targeted group offer. The feedback in the consultation told us how much families really value the stay and play opportunities. So we're going to be developing those in the holiday periods and at the weekends, and we'll be starting those this summer. So we've already got some plans in place. So we'll be communicating out what they are and where those opportunities are. Elizabeth has already sort of spoken around the continuing to link and working across all our schemes. So that's our HAF and the wraparound care, as well as the Borough of Sports. And there's lots of developments coming through there. And then again, also Elizabeth has mentioned, we are appointing a sort of dedicated worker to focus on communicating with families and promoting short breaks, as well as other SEND support services to increase the take up. Her name is Tracy, and she starts next week. She's already very knowledgeable about local SEND services and is very experienced at sort of working in this areas, and knows about the issues and challenges for families with children with disabilities. So I think she's a great appointment, and she'll be really able to help families with their signposting. And she's going to be the key contact for families around this sort of short breaks changes, just to make sure that everyone's up to date and knows what's going on. The next slide, please. So this is the next slide. Really just sets out where I think I said that there needs to be a little bit more further work and thinking. We haven't got a final decision yet on the proposal to remove the option of direct payments as part of the targeted short breaks offer. If the final decision is to remove the offer for existing, I suppose, and new families, the departmental leadership team will obviously agree what that transition process and timescales looks like for moving families with existing packages to new support packages, and any exemptions to that transitions. But I think it's just to reassure families that discussions with families with existing packages about any changes, they would not start until the new providers and offer was known. So any transition for families couldn't happen until there was almost they would know what the alternative offer would be. And then if the final decision is to retain the offer, we will just review the current direct payment model. We'll do some benchmarking with other local authorities. We've already sort of started some, but a little bit more. And we'll need to look at the staffing model needed around this. The last point is, I suppose, although we know that the offer from April 26 will be expanded and able to support more families, we will be working to expand it further, especially the overnights offer. And then I think I've got a few more slides. So if I can move on. Yes, this was just really to set out what our sort of focus areas will be over the summer and into the autumn term. So we'll be working hard to make sure we get a final decision on direct payments, and then do the work around this decision. It's communicating with families. As I said, this is sort of the start today, but next week we'll be obviously going out as wide as we can, just with some updates. But the main communication plan with families will be working on with Kids First, and I suppose that we'll be thinking about what that looks like in the autumn term. Is it workshop events? Is it online meetings? Is it emails, correspondence? I think it needs to be a range. And then obviously we're going to be progressing the procurement, so to making sure that we have our new providers ready to go and to deliver services from April 26. And we'll ensure that we're continuing meeting and talking with our the Kids First representatives that we've been working with, to ensure that we have parental input in our planning, and as we start sort of implementing the changes. And then the final slide, I wasn't planning to talk through, but this just sets out our sort of time frame between now and sort of going live with our new offer in April 26.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Claire. So we've just got a couple more things towards the end of our agenda, and hopefully, as I said, Alison Stewart from the ICB is going to be joining us at the end. So just an update about the new special school. So you will have heard maybe some of the background about this over the past a couple of years probably, because we had a new special free school agreed in principle by the DFE in 2022. We started talking about it there. It's really important. We need more specialist places available for children in our local area. We've only got 3 special schools in Merton. And the only way that we can create a new school is it has to be a free school. It's not something that the council can just set up on its own. And you can see there the needs, the types of children, the needs of the children who will be could be supported in this school. Now, OCAT, so that's Orchard Hill College Academy Trust, were approved as the trust provider in spring 2024. Again, it's a DFE decision, but we were really pleased. They are a great trust with some really good schools. We have, however, hit a bit of a barrier. As I said, it's for the DFE to deliver this, and unfortunately, we have not been able to get confirmation from the DFE about the site for the new school. We had hoped that opening would happen in September 2027. That's what we had been originally planning for, possibly even 2026, but it's absolutely not possible prior to even prior to September 28. We are continuing to push this forward because this is so important to open this. But we know these places are needed sooner rather than later. So again, as you possibly have heard in previous times, but just to give you the update, OCAT, Orchard Hill, are going to deliver some of those required places from September this year. And they're going to do that, not opening a new school, because that's not allowed, as I said. What will be opening at the Chaucer Centre in Morden will be a satellite of the existing Beedlesford School. Yes, and it will be for a smaller number of places in September, 40, rise to 60 in September 26 and 80 in September 27. It's not to go above 80 is going to be really, really hard with the space that we've got available to us at the Chaucer Centre. And as you can see, we want a 120 place school. So as I said, a new school, not just a satellite site of Beedlesford, is what we really, really need. So we're looking again at our overall sufficiency, and we know that we need, as I said, we need more specialist placements, but we're also thinking about the units that we might be developing further with our secondary schools. The last sort of phrase in there, the forthcoming government white paper, some of you may have come across reference to this before. The government has promised a new white paper on SEND and education in the autumn term. Things are sort of leaking out. We know it will have a big focus on SEND, or at least that's what we understand. But we'll wait to see what happens there. But within that white paper, we need them sort of nationally to sort of address the fact that there is a shortage of spaces nationally of specialist provision. For some of you, you will know either directly or because of your friends and family that so for some children, we can't even find specialist placements in the more expensive non-maintained or independent sector. So it's not just that we haven't got maintained specialist places, we're struggling to find them in the non-maintained independent sector. So there's an absolute need for growth in that area. And that is certainly what we are lobbying the government for. And I think that is the end of our presentation.
But you might have known me previously as the head of SEND. So I have got some slides that I can share, but I suggest I don't, and I'll send them to you afterwards, and I'll give you a sort of an overview of what's happening. Just quick show of hands, are people aware of the changes in the NHS at the moment?
Can't see many hands going up, Alison.
No. Okay.
Oh, Alison is waving at us. Thank you, Alison.
Okay. Okay. So, in short, lots and lots of changes that are happening that are affecting NHS England, which is our sort of assurance. Quango is the word that comes to mind. Assurance arm. So, NHS England is going to be merging with the Department of Health and Social Care, integrated care boards. So the bit of the NHS that I sit within is going through a really major restructure. So that's happening currently with a very tight turnaround time. So for South West London, we've been asked to look at 58% savings within the organisation. So it really is very, very significant and will affect it will affect roles, it will affect who does what, etc. So we're working through that at the moment. In terms of the priorities that the ICB will be looking at, the role that's being described is strategic commissioning. And you may say, what is that? And I slightly wonder about that myself. So it is really looking at how our services for the population within any local area commission. So how well does the ICB understand the needs of the local area? Are there adequate services commissioned, etc.? So that will, we think, be the purpose, will be the purpose of the ICB moving forward. Within that, there's work around the development of a long-term population health strategy, which will look at how pathways work within health. And there's something that is called a payer function. So the ICB will be, in effect, paying for these services. So that's all quite significant. In terms of SEND, as you'll be aware, at local areas, we have designated clinical officers whose role comes from the Children and Families Act and is intended to look at the join up, if you like, between health and the local authority in meeting the needs of children and young people with SEND. The position we're in with that role at the moment is that it may transfer out of the ICBs, but we don't know quite where to. That obviously is also happening at the time that we know that there will be a white paper coming out around SEND in the autumn. So there are lots of questions at the moment. My feeling about this is we continue to require our DCOs to be working on delivering the SEND statutory functions, to be reporting back into the Integrated Care Board on to provide assurance around delivery of SEND services. So that's a little bit tricky. I think also in that context for Merton specifically, our designated clinical officer has just gone on maternity leave. So that's Karishma, who some of you may know. Karishma's gone on maternity leave, and we are working really hard to try and make sure that we can get some maternity cover for her. So I am talking to somebody at the moment who would be brilliant if we can get her to be working with us as a team. That would be a really positive thing, but we've obviously got to get it through all of the ICB structures at the moment. So I'm going to stop there and open up for questions. And I realise that was quite a sort of technical overview of some of the changes within the ICB. So if anybody's got any further questions once I've circulated the slides, I'm really happy to pick them up, or if you want to drop me an email, do so, and I will come back to you. It might take me a little bit of time, but I will come back to you. The other thing, sorry, that I should say in terms of the wider NHS changes is that we also know that all of our providers, so Epsom St Helier, Sutton Health and Care, are also having to make some quite significant cost savings at the moment. So over to you.
Shall we stop recording, Tahina?